CDH Films presents an animated film done with Legos, The Sea of Monsters, Book 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, from the original novel by Rick Riordan, narrated to you by me, Chris. 12-year-old New Yorker Percy Jackson had quite an adventurous summer 1 year ago when he learned he was a descendant of the Greek god Poseidon, and also set out on a quest to uncover Zeus's stolen lightning bolt, along with his best friend Grover Underwood, who was really a satyr, and his other new friend Annabeth Chase, who was a descendant of Athena. And now, 1 year later, Percy was now 13 and had just one more day before finishing the school year. After that, he would be off to the awesome summer camp he had gone to called Camp Half-Blood. It was a camp where offsprings of Greek gods like Percy would go to be trained to become great heroes. It was also technically the only sanctuary for people like them due to the Earth's population of Greek monsters running around. Of course, no mortals would see them due to the magical force called the Mist, which deceived them from seeing any monsters or magical activity at all. The night before the last day of school, Percy, for some reason, had a dream of Grover being chased by a monster through some beach town. Maybe it was Florida. It wasn't all that clear to see what was chasing him, but as Percy watched Grover reach a bridal store, he heard a deep voice that said, "Mine!" Before he could catch what happened next, Percy woke up from the call of breakfast. Percy wondered, even if he was just dreaming it, could it have actually been happening? He remembered how he had dreams of other things that really happened around the first time he learned he was a demigod. He told his mom, Sally, about the dream during breakfast. "I wouldn't worry about it, dear," she said. "Grover's a big satyr now. If there had been any trouble, I'm sure we would have heard from camp." Then she mentioned she was notified by Chiron, the one in charge of the camp's activities, and was told that it might not be safe to go to the camp because there's been trouble. When Percy heard that, he panicked and flooded with questions. Before Sally could answer, the clock struck 7:30 a.m. "You better hurry," Sally said. "You don't want to keep Tyson waiting." Percy knew she was right. He knew if Tyson ended up going to school without him, he'd be pretty upset. Tyson was this tall, overweight homeless kid who was found living in a box in an alley on 72nd Street. His voice was deep, but he talked like a little kid, and he acted like one too, probably because he had never been to school and no one ever took care of him. As far as Percy and Sally knew, Tyson had been abandoned when he was younger. If it wasn't for Sally's concern, he probably wouldn't have gotten too far in life. The social workers tried everything, but it seemed most likely that Tyson didn't exist. The school he and Percy went to, Merriweather Prep, had adopted him as a community service project to show students could feel good about themselves, but Tyson always went back to his box on 72nd Street. And unfortunately, everyone kept picking on him as soon as they learned he was a softie. Percy was his only friend, and Tyson was Percy's only friend. Later that day in gym class, the class got ready for Dodgeball. The school bully, Matt Sloan, had his own group of goons on his team while Percy and Tyson were teamed up with a bunch of other outcasts who all got harassed by Sloan. "You're going down, Jackson," he said. "Scared," Tyson said to Percy. "Smell funny." "What?" Percy asked. "Them," Tyson said, pointing to Sloan's team. The funny thing they noticed about the guys on Sloan's team, Percy swore he'd never seen them before. When the game started, Percy was smacked in the gut with a dodgeball faster than he could even see it coming. It felt so hard, like a bowling ball zooming at the speed of sound. "Hey, you could have killed somebody," Percy yelled. "I hope so, Perseus Jackson," said one of the opponents. "I hope so." Now that part right there was not right. Nobody called Percy by his full name. Nobody who was human, that is. Percy knew without even having to guess that the enemy players were monsters in disguise. Everyone on the enemy team except Matt Sloan were all big, bad, ugly giants. Of course, Sloan was deceived by the mist to think they were still human boys, so he wasn't aware of anything. The same went for every other human in the room. And the coach was too distracted to even listen. The giant held up another dodgeball, which now looked like a huge cannonball on fire. He aimed and threw it at Percy. But Tyson caught it with his hand. Percy couldn't figure out how he was able to do that with his bare human hand, but at least he was saved. Percy had to get out of there before he got killed. He could have used Riptide, the sword he had, but it was in his other pants in his locker room in the men's room, and the door was locked. Then he had an idea. He ran and stood in front of the door to the locker room. Then he waited and jumped out of the way as a burning cannonball blew up the door. Percy raced to his locker, pulled out his jeans, and took out Riptide. Riptide was English for Anaklusmos, which was a pen that magically transformed into a sword once uncapping it. The pen is mightier than the sword. Another giant got closer, but before Percy could make his move, the giant got stabbed from behind. It was Annabeth. Boy, was Percy glad to see her. She pointed to Tyson and said to bring him along, then meet her outside. Not to mention she gave Tyson a disturbed look when she looked at him. Then she put on her magic baseball cap and disappeared. When they got outside, Annabeth told Percy she had been chased by monsters since reaching Virginia and had dreams about the camp being in danger. Percy told her about his dream about Grover. Then Tyson raised up his hand and asked what was going on. After saving his life, Percy figured he deserved an explanation. So he told him those guys back there were giants, and the fact that the Greek gods still exist and now living in the USA, and he and Annabeth were demigods. Annabeth mentioned the giants were called Laestrygonians. For some reason, Tyson didn't really act too surprised. Then they went to the sidewalk and Annabeth took out an ancient Greek coin called a drachma and dropped it in the concrete. Instead of bouncing on the ground, it sunk right down like quicksand. Then she shouted something in a different language like she was casting a spell or summoning something. Sitai Oharma Diabolis. And somehow, Percy was able to understand it. She had said, "Stop, chariot of damnation," in ancient Greek. 1 second later, in the spot where the coin fell, the concrete started melting and red liquid started boiling. Then a car erupted from the ooze. It was a taxi cab painted smoke gray. "I can't just leave Tyson," said Percy. "Fine, bring him along," Annabeth said, like she was getting annoyed. When they crawled into the back seat, they noticed in the front there was not one cabbie, but 3 cabbies. More specifically, 3 very old ladies in matching cloaks. And Percy recognized them from last summer. The 3 Fates. Yep, the 3 old ladies who all had empty eye sockets and all shared one single green eye and could see people's destiny. Clotho, Atropos, and Lachesis. But now they called themselves Wasp, Anger, and Tempest. They hit the gas and drove super fast. "Gonna be sick," Tyson said. "Don't worry," said Annabeth. "The Grey Sisters know what they're doing. They're very wise." "Oh yes, wise," Anger said. "We know everything. The city, the Nepal capital, the location you seek." "What location?" Percy asked. "No, don't tell him," said Tempest. "Remember what happened last time? How we ended up losing the eye?" "That reminds me. Give it here," said Wasp. "But you had it yesterday," Anger complained. "Well, I'm driving," said Wasp. All 3 of them started fighting over the eye. Then they dropped it and it fell in front of Percy. "We can't see," they said. "Give us the eye." "Not until you tell me about the location," Percy said. "All right," said Anger. 30, 31, 75, 12. Just remember those exact numbers in that exact order. That's all we can tell you. Suddenly the cab squealed to a halt. They were somewhere in the countryside of Long Island. They had reached their stop. The trio climbed out of the car, Percy gave the Fates back their eye, and they zoomed away without even waiting to get paid. Up on the hill the kids could see why. There was a battle between some of the campers and two big mechanical bronze bulls, about twice the size as normal bulls, with surfaces made of bronze and also metal horns and shiny red eyes made of rubies. Those are Hephaestus's Colchis bulls, Annabeth had mentioned. Just when you thought a single minotaur was bad enough. The group of campers fighting the bulls were led by the camp bully, Clarice LaRue, daughter of Ares. "Hold the line!" she shouted, although most of the campers were already getting fried. The most surprising thing was that the bulls managed to pass the pine tree and reach the other side of the hill. That shouldn't have happened because there was like a force field covering the camp to keep monsters from entering. "I'm going in," said Percy, raising his sword. "Tyson, stay here," he told him. "I don't want you getting hurt." "But Percy," said Annabeth, "he just got lucky with the giants. He's immortal," Percy said. He managed to swing his sword at the first bull, but it kept running and it turned back again at Percy. No way could Percy crawl out of its path, and for such a huge thing, it could really move super fast. "Tyson, help him!" Annabeth shouted. "Can't get through," he said. "I, Annabeth Chase, allow you to enter the camp." 1 second, thunder shook. The next, Tyson was walking past the edge of the shield. "Percy needs help," he shouted as he ran between Percy and the bull. "Tyson, no!" Percy shouted, but it was too late. The bull opened its mouth and blew a blast of fire at Tyson. Just when Percy thought his friend was fried to ashes, when the flames died, Tyson was still standing there in one piece. Not even his filthy clothes looked any worse. The next surprise was that Tyson was able to punch the bull in the face and send it flying. "Bad cow," Tyson yelled. Then he gave that cow another pow and sent that cow down to the ground. The bull was down and defeated. Percy looked over at Tyson. "You didn't die," he said to him. "Percy, have you ever actually looked at Tyson, like, closely in the face?" Annabeth asked. "Take a closer look at him," she said. "Look real carefully." It must have been usually hard for Percy to look at Tyson directly in the face, probably because he was so much higher than most people he knew. It was either that, or he just couldn't stand the usual look of peanut butter in his teeth. He stared at him for 1 second, then the next second, the image seemed to change to what looked like a single eye right in the middle of Tyson's face. Tyson was really a Cyclops, and the mist was disguising him to look human. That would explain why he didn't burn up. "There's lots of them in all the big cities," said Annabeth. "They're always getting abandoned and growing up wildly on the streets. However, you found him. We should take him to Chiron. He'll know what to do." Percy couldn't figure out how the mist was so strong to trick him from realizing what Tyson really was that whole time. But he didn't have time to worry about it. They had to help the other campers.